Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming and welcome to another International Manifesto Group webinar on Trump's aggression in Latin America, the return of the Monroe Doctrine, question mark. I'm Radhika Desai, the convener of the International Manifesto Group and the moderator for today's event. One might be forgiven for thinking that the world changed utterly on the 5th of November 2024 when Donald Trump was re-elected president. He has put nearly all parts of the world on a roller coaster with his promises and threats, none more so than the Americas. He threatened to make Canada the 51st state, to acquire Greenland, to take back the Panama Canal, to impose punishing tariffs on Mexico, and to step up the already ruinous war on drugs in that country, and to sanction any country buying Venezuelan oil, threatening to choke off the principal export of that heroic people, already beleaguered by decades of US and Western sanctions. It is no wonder that media and social media have been abuzz with talk of the reinvigoration of the Monroe Doctrine, originally proclaimed in 1823, declaring that the Western Hemisphere was the United States sphere of influence. So what are we to make of it? Are we sort of, turning the clock back and taking us all back to a late 19th century scenario? Certainly you'd think that if you listen to Trump and his lionization of figures like President McKinley. And undoubtedly, Trump has already created much damage and destruction, not just by carrying out these threats, which are still in their preliminary phases of implementation, but just by making them. Undoubtedly, more damage and destruction are to come, largely to be inflicted on the weak. At the same time, it is not at all clear whether he will or can carry out these threats. That's what our panel discussion is going to be about today. And to start us off, I thought I would outline some of what I consider to be the key parameters of the discussion. While the Monroe Doctrine was said to have been originally proclaimed in 1823, so 202 years ago, its meaning and enforcement have been a movable feast over these 2 centuries. Originally proclaimed to exclude European powers from the Western Hemisphere, today it is directed towards none more than China, whose footprint, of course, on both the continents is growing every day. Originally taken to imply support for the independence of Latin American countries, if only because the United States did not have the military capacity to do much else, by the end of the 19th century, when it acquired that capacity, the doctrine began to be enforced, and it spelled the beginning of the nefarious gunboat diplomacy for which the United States became famous, particularly vis-a-vis the Americas. And since then, the doctrine has threatened the independence de facto, if not de jure, of the same countries, or at least the weaker ones among them. The Monroe Doctrine emerges, so in its effective form from the late 19th century, it emerges from a time when new powers began challenging British industry and empire with their own industries and empire. The French had West Africa after losing North America. While hanging on to some territories in southern Africa, the Germans always eyed Eastern Europe. Japan had its East Asian co-prosperity sphere. The Americas were the United States' intended backyard, though its situation was peculiar. Having been detained by its project of internal colonialism, as its westward expansion is also called, and therefore arriving late in the imperial game, it had to be satisfied not by direct colonization, but with exerting control over a Western Hemisphere that was already composed of formerly independent states, usually quite capable of asserting their independence. So finally today, Trump's version, often dubbed the Monroe Doctrine, will be hampered by the United States' decreasing ability to impose its will, while those of China and Russia, powers that have been expanding the options of Latin American countries, have only been growing. Consider that in his first call with the Canadian Prime Minister, the new Canadian Prime Minister, Trump refrained from any allusions um, to the 51st state, indicated agreement to negotiate tariffs, and praised Canada and Carney, while Carney said that Trump respected Canadian sovereignty. Consider that BlackRock's agreement to purchase C.K. Hutchison's non-Chinese port holdings, including the two ports at either end of the Panama Canal, which Trump had hailed as the first step in reclaiming the Panama Canal, is now being scrutinized by Chinese authorities, putting it in limbo and in danger of being cancelled. Consider that J.D. and Usha Vance's visit to Greenland, planned to make the US claim, has now, to stake the US claim, was then scaled back to a short visit to the US base there, which had always been there for a long time anyway, during which, moreover, the vice president took pains to deny that the US would use military force. Consider further that in the case of Mexico, the country most vulnerable to Trump's tariff tantrums, President Claudia Sheinbaum will be aided in her difficult struggle to minimize the harm to the Mexican economy by the inflationary effects of tariffs on US prices, their deflationary effect on the US stock market, and the extensive US corporate interests that still rely on close economic relations with Mexico. And finally, consider that even against Venezuela, already battered by decades-long US regime change operation, there is speculation as to whether the threat to impose 25% additional tariffs on countries, chiefly India and China, buying Venezuelan oil, will be carried out for long, or whether it is just being used as a negotiation strategy. After all, the United States regime change operation in Venezuela has not worked.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on this screen.